Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. In this video, I'd like to discuss the serious prospect of a run on the pound, how likely it is, what it would mean for ordinary people. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So we all know that the pound fell against the dollar as well as other currencies on Friday as Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng delivered his emergency budget speech. Right-wing commentators have tried to distract the public by saying, actually, several currencies are falling against the dollar, that this is a strong performance from the dollar, not weakness from the pound, which is a little unusual because wouldn't that have to be to praise President Biden? They don't usually like doing that. But never mind, they don't mention that bit. But the pound has been losing ground against those other currencies as well. It even lost out to the Russian ruble, for goodness sake. Don't try and tell me that as Kwarteng was delivering his speech, all of a sudden some mad but unrelated thing happened which caused all these other currencies to suddenly rise, but the pound, inexplicably, but obviously nothing at all to do with the government's budget, was left behind. The pound lost 8% of its value against the ruble since Kwarteng opened his mouth. That's a bigger percentage drop than against the dollar. And as at the time of recording this anyway, I've been doing some maths. Already the consequences of this are our imports are now more expensive. That's ultimately what happens when your currency drops in value. Obviously, when we buy something from abroad, we think we're paying for it in pounds, but we're buying it at the price of the seller in their currency. So we buy from Europe, we mostly use euros. We buy from America, mostly dollars. We buy from Russia, which we still do, and we pay rubles. All of these currencies are now worth more than they were before Kwarteng opened his ill-fated mouth. You know, these imports are costing us more. In fact, they don't even need to be imports. Because with the energy crisis being topical, it's worth reminding people that the fuels that we extract from the UK, North Sea oil and gas, are not state-owned operations. Private companies exploit them and sell the products on the international market. So if we ever buy anything, we don't get preferential rates because it's come from our land. No, we pay the international market rates. So even our own natural resources are costing more because the pound is weaker. The consequence of this, price goes up for essentials. When ordinary people already struggling under the cost of living crisis, which started to really bite last year after leaving the EU single market, the last thing we need is a significantly weaker pound. But it's been going for some time. Compared to a year ago, the pound is 22% lower against the dollar, 5% lower against the euro, 38% lower against the ruble. It's not all bad news though. It is 2% up against the yen compared to a year ago. Mind you, it is still lower against the yen compared to when Truss became Prime Minister. The pound has dropped 6% against the yen, since she took over. It just means that no matter where you try and import from, it's costing more without even factoring in trading costs like transport, paperwork and import fees, all of which have increased a lot since Brexit. And the thing is, it wasn't just that the pound tanked after Kwarteng's speech and then rallied a bit and then that was it. It's kept falling. It's lower today than it was on Saturday, for example, after the Asian markets opened. At one point, the pound dropped almost to parity with the dollar. It was actually the lowest it's ever been in the history of the currency, though it did recover a bit since. A run on the pound is basically a situation whereby the currency just keeps falling due to failing investor confidence. If this happens, and we may not now be far from it, the consequences for ordinary people are frequent and sustained price rises. The government would be forced to deal with it. Now, that can take the form of investing in your own currency, basically. So the government could sell foreign currencies and use the money to buy pounds to shore up the value. So what it means is you'd be taking out pound sterling from the global economy. So you raise the value by the fact that you're reducing supply back to demand levels. What the Bank of England will absolutely do is raise interest rates. Now, they've already been trying to do this to counter inflation, which hasn't always necessarily made sense because raising interest rates to tackle inflation is designed to reduce demand. So if inflation is caused by loads of people getting into debt for things like new kitchens or cars or something like that, well, you raise the interest rates to make it less attractive, so reduce the people's demand for money from banks for loans and things like that. But our inflation is not caused by high demand, but low supply. But a falling pound would definitely trigger interest rate rises. These would hit, amongst others, mortgage holders. It'd hit renters as well, because their landlords may well have mortgages on the properties. But from the Tories' point of view, it's the homeowners that are the real issue, and a lot of their voters are homeowners. I've talked about this in the past when looking at changing demographics. Like when the level of home ownership increases in an area, you often find the Conservatives all of a sudden get more of a foothold, even taking over what was once a Labour area. And it's nothing to do with the policies of the day. It's to do with the fact that people just think Conservatives are better for property owners. But most of them have mortgages still to pay off. If the rate isn't fixed, or if that fixed period's coming to an end, the last thing you want to see is the papers talking about interest rate rises. That's not going to impress traditional Tory voters. The last run on the pound was under John Major. Even though the economy recovered before the next election, he still lost it as he never regained his reputation for economic competence. Truss could preside over the next run on the pound, and she's not going to see an economic recovery. Her run on the pound won't be caused by hard-nosed investors playing the market either, but her own cretinous policies. It's not even like the government tried to calm down market jitters after Friday. In fact, they poured fuel on the fire by promising more of the same in the new year. Even if they're planning more of the same in the new year, why say so when you know it's just going to weaken the pound further? It is almost like they're really just doing this to help their rich mates short the pound, isn't it? I see in the Financial Times news that traders are betting on a sudden rise in interest rates. The market is expecting it. The report suggests that traders seem to be expecting a 0.5% interest rate rise this week, and there's already been one recently, and another 1% on top of that in November. Now, the base rate's already 2.25%, and for most of the time since the 2008 global crash, interest rates were basically zero. You know, they started rising after Brexit, and it's not like even if it goes up to 3.75%, which is what the market seems to be thinking it will do this year, it's not like that would be a huge level historically, of course not. But people adjust their level of debt to the interest they have to pay on it. And for an incredibly long time, that rate has basically been zero plus whatever the lender adds on top. And in a space of a year, which is nothing in the lifetime of a major repayment plan, like a mortgage, or even just one for your kitchen, which might be a 5-year plan, it's gone up several percent. That could easily be thousands being added to the mortgage, depending on how far into repaying it you are. And this is incredibly bad news for your average Tory voter, which means it's incredibly bad news for your average Tory MP. And what's bad for your average Tory MP should be bad for the Tory government. Right now, Liz Truss is forging ahead with policies which are not at all in tune with crucial swing voters, or even usually reliable Conservative with a small c voters. She clearly expects her backbenchers to just suck it up for fear of making the party look disunited. But surely there comes a point where the apparent unity of the party is no longer a strength. Yes, a disunited party looks chaotic and not fit to govern. Sure, absolutely. But surely a party that is united behind the belief that not just the poor but the middle classes should be suffering falling living standards just so that the very wealthy can have even more money to throw on the pile is not going to make them look any more fit for government, is it? It was always said that the Conservatives made a terrible error in not replacing John Major after he crashed the economy. Right now, it's not so straightforward for the Tories. I talked recently about the trap they find themselves in. Getting rid of Truss may happen, but it's not necessarily the best course of action for them. But if Tory MPs want to fight for their seat at the next election, they're going to have to do something, and they may have to do it quickly. Look at the situation. Look how much damage she's done to the party's reputation in less than 3 weeks as Prime Minister. Because if they don't do something about this, they may well have to just fill their boots in the next 2 years, then look for another job. Keir Starmer is currently enjoying a very supportive Labour conference as he sits on polling that is projecting a substantial Labour majority. Liz Truss will be heading to her first conference as leader next week. She's going to be facing delegates who had to work around a rail strike, are facing higher mortgage payments, and may well be reading a newspaper by then talking about how the run on the pound is going to hit their pockets. You cannot imagine that any Tory MP is going to relish that situation. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.